about sitting and various ergonomic challenges is Dr. Turner Osler himself. He's a trauma surgeon from Burlington, Vermont, and we're very happy to have him back on the show. So welcome back to RSI Help YouTube.
Thank you, Deborah.
Do you remember that conversation we had? I remember in the beginning we were talking about ergonomics, and you had some quibbles with it, as I recall.
Yeah, well, the whole science of ergonomics is sort of an interesting origin. It was mostly about trying to make people work more efficiently. It wasn't really about trying to help people have more comfortable lives or protect their joints and posture. It was really about getting more work done. You would think that the two would coincide. If you can keep your workers healthy, they'll be able to work better and everybody wins. But that hasn't always been the case. Also, the whole business of deciding what the best way to sit isn't it all obvious? If you ask people, what's most comfortable, that might not be the best entree into figuring out how people ought to best sit. If you ask people which cereal they like best, they might pick the one with the most sugar. So people's preference isn't necessarily what's actually best for them in the sense of living long, healthy, happy lives.
A lot of people prefer slouching.
Mm-hmm. I think people prefer slouching because the chairs we give them kind of encourage slouching. Because the chairs that we give people and the way we tell them to sit on them isn't comfortable and it isn't sustainable. People just can't sit in that way without getting fatigued quite quickly. And then they start leaning and slouching and stretching and it's such a common phenomenon that you hear in the world of ergonomics. The best posture is the next posture. Nobody is ever comfortable. If you sit down in a standard chair, okay, I'm fine for the first few minutes, but pretty soon you're trying to sit on one sits bone or the other, or on your armrests, or sliding forward or sliding back, because you really are having a terrible time finding any place that works for very long, because this chair is like distorting your posture. But you're really designed to be supported not from the outside by something that somebody's cooked up in a factory. You're really designed to be supported by your own internal ergonomics. You have this bony structure from which your body hangs quite comfortably. And we've been using it for 3 billion years if you count the prototypes, and our current spinal configuration has been more or less constant for the last 3 million years. So it's pretty perfectly designed, but it's not designed for slouching, or at least not designed for slouching 8 hours a day for decades.
Making minute hand movements repetitively all day.
Right.
But,
No,
one of the things that's really interesting about sitting is that it's so new.
Mm-hmm.
And the choices that people have in other countries where they're not, well, I think they're very advanced. Frankly, you see people walking with big bricks on their head with perfect posture and perfect alignment. It's a joy for me to watch. Or hunkering, which is the position of, it's like what toddlers do when they're actually very close to the ground. And then to get up takes enormous quad strength. I mean, to get from a hunkering position into standing is really great. I mean, for your quads and your core strength and everything else.
But if you do it every day, you get that strength just comes as part of your birthright, because you get that workout as part of every day's normal activities. The people have, had this idea of, well, how do other cultures do it? Or even better, how did we do it as a people when we were hunter-gatherers, really just 15 or 20,000 years ago, going back 3 million years. And this has been studied by people, anthropologists who have they put accelerometers on hunter-gatherer peoples, the Hadza in Tanzania, a recent such study. And it turns out that hunter-gatherers spend 8 or 10 hours a day just sitting around, like people in Manhattan office buildings. You know, it's shocking to find that we have this idea of the noble hunter-gatherer, out chasing lions all day long. No, 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 they don't chase lions all day long. They
But were
spend
they sitting in chairs?
No, here's the thing. When you put the accelerometer on them and they're at rest, then you go look at them and they're squatting because they don't have any furniture. They make huts to get out of the rain, but they don't have any furniture, and so their position of rest is squatting. And it turns out that their blood lipids are better, and their blood pressure is better, and they have less diabetes. And the whole business of sitting slouched in a chair turns out to have catastrophically bad results for your medical health and well-being. The Hadza, by contrast, are squatting, and this is a very energetic posture because they're balancing over their feet. Unfortunately, squatting isn't a very good answer for most Westerners because we've lost the ability to squat. You look at little kids, they squat quite comfortably, but because we've spent 10 hours a day for decades sitting in chairs, typically at the 90-90-90 posture, we've basically lost the ability to squat. It's very difficult to recover it.
And
so,
just to clarify, we don't recommend the 90-90 posture.
No. This is you typically find this in ergonomics books, but it's a catastrophically bad idea because it basically forces people to lose the normal hollow in the lower portion of their back, their lumbar lordosis, and replace it with a slouch. In order to really sit with a normal spinal architecture, you need to have your knees lower than your hips, which is you have to go out of your way to adjust your ergonomic chair in order to get to a posture that actually lets your spine express its normal curves.
One thing I've always been curious about is the effect of this slouched, collapsed posture on internal organs.
No, people talk about that a lot, and I don't even know how you'd study it. So I was a trauma surgeon for 30 years, so I've been in there and rooting around in people's internal organs, and there's lots of room in there. The idea that they're getting squashed seems odd to me, but it is true that as you sink into a C position, the volume of the peritoneal cavity, the bucket where you keep your guts, gets smaller. And whether organ perfusion, whether the amount of blood flowing through the organs actually goes down in consequence, I don't know if anybody's actually measured that. But there's such oversupply of blood to the organs. They're richly supplied with blood. It would be very hard to contort the body in a way that made organ perfusion problematic, because organ perfusion is so important that there's just so much extra capacity. I mean, your kidneys see every drop of blood in your body about every 5 minutes.
Wow.
Think of that. I mean, the kidneys do an immense amount of blood just flows in and out of the kidney, in the renal artery and out the renal vein, and urine and impurities are squeezed out as it goes through. So huge amounts of blood flowing through the kidney, huge amounts of blood flowing through the liver. Anybody with a gunshot wound to the liver who's ever taken care of a patient with a gunshot wound to the liver, there's a lot of blood flowing through the liver, let me tell you. So the idea that you could compromise the circulation with posture, I don't know that that's true.
I wasn't thinking so much actually of posture, but of function, like taking a deep breath.
So for sure, breathing changes all the organization, and a deep breath, with a deep breath, your diaphragm moves quite a long way, into the chest when you exhale, and out of the chest and down in the peritoneal cavity when you inhale. And then you can see the guts all sloshing around. And so, a deep breath is kind of a massage for all the guts in the peritoneal cavity. Guts it's the word we use in the operating room. It's kind of generically everything that sloshes around inside the belly.
There's also a question, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but it seems like it wouldn't be good in terms of constipation, because squatting is the natural position of evacuation in other cultures. And I think also childbirth, it sort of goes with gravity and everything else. And
We have whole clinics full of people who have those kinds of issues. You know, they become constipated, and then their anal architecture gets ripped and torn, anal fissures. I mean, these are pretty miserable people. And basically, it's brought on by two things. You know, we eat a diet that's way too low in fiber. You know, the Western diet is catastrophic in that way. Um, in Africa, where you know, people eat a lot of cassava and you know, high fiber foods. One researcher described the stools of a particular culture as, quote, heroic. Because you know, and when you have larger volumes, then it's easier to have complete evacuation, and your colon can get a grip on it. But the other thing that you allude to is posture is extremely important, and the posture we've picked for defecation in the Western culture, you know, sitting 90 90 90 on a toilet, really makes it very, very hard to straighten out the kink that in the rectum that keeps your stool from leaking when you don't want it to. And so there's the whole squatty potty kind of, you know, culture of, you know, trying to well, or you could just squat on your toilet, or and it's pretty much not just Western, but English and American. I don't know if you've ever been to the loo in Paris, but they used to have just raised footprints where you would squat in order to have a bowel movement. So you know, it's not every Western culture that's adopted this sitting on a toilet thing, but the sitting on a toilet thing is a problem. Hemorrhoids, among other things.
also been curious about this idea that if you're not using a muscle in the fitness world where I am conversant, you get atrophied. You don't, you know, you're not using the body in a normal way as you would be if you were just simply walking.
Mm-hmm. No, Hippocrates, you know, observed that which is used develops, and that which is not used wastes away. You know, we've known this for as long as we've been writing about medicine. And Hippocrates also said walking was man's best medicine, by which he meant all humans.
So can you talk about the atrophying, if it's true, the atrophic effect of sitting
Right.
for long periods?
Yeah, so any muscle that's not used, you know, your body takes a look at it and says, well, I'm wasting protein here. I should, you know, so I need to transfer that muscle mass to some other muscle that we're actually using. So merely by not using a muscle, you guarantee that it will lose its functional mass and its strength. Famously, if somebody breaks their arm and you put it in a cast, when you saw the cast off, you know, I have seen strong men weep at what their extremity now looks like, because it's become this skinny, wizened thing that, you know, doesn't remotely resemble their other arm in just a matter of weeks. Fortunately, it comes back quickly, but it can be pretty horrifying just how quickly muscles atrophy. And so when people are like sitting slouched for, you know, 8 or 10 hours a day for decades, they're the muscles that are the foundation for sitting up actively really become, you know, paper thin. You know, and when you operate on people, you know, you cut through the external oblique and the internal oblique, and you see these. Did we already go through the external oblique? Said that really? That was it? You know, I mean, sometimes the muscle layers have become so attenuated and thin that you have to look twice to be sure that it's there, which is,
Wow.
yeah, it's a little alarming, but it's not surprising.
And then there's also the shortening effect, you know, the hamstrings and the psoas.
Right, which is why we can't squat, right? Because we don't go to the deep squat as the Hadza do every time they want to take a rest from walking. And so they stretch out that machinery. People who are sitting 90, 90, 90 in a ergonomic chair never have that full range of motion. And so they lose that range of motion. And over really just a matter of the first few years of, well, first 10 years of life, kids kind of lose their ability to squat. And
It's really
and as a
tragic.
parent, you know, you feel like you're complicit in this destruction of your child. I mean, they come into the world with these abilities, and you know, merely by as soon as they go to school and they're like sitting all day long on these crummy chairs we give them, you know, the game is lost.
Yeah, it's so awful. I mean, if you look at an infant, they can move their toes individually. They can lift their toes like
They can
little.
interdigitate their toes. You know, they can do all of these cool things that we would be able to do had we pursued it.
Yes. So it seems as though I was talking with one person who used to run an RSI group. Maybe she still does. And she was talking about ergonomics, and she says, you know, it just pushes the injury around. And, you know, we're not looking in a holistic, they're
Like
not taking,
whack-a-mole.
yeah, exactly. They're not taking a holistic approach
Mhm,
the way I think you should look at the body, the whole person, the whole body, the whole environment, and see how it all interconnects.
mhm,
You know, they try to fix one thing. Okay, so people are getting mouse shouldered, let's make a vertical mouse, but you're still using one arm, one digit. What's the action like? How much are you holding it? And it's just, it's not a solution. It's, they try to solve a technological problem with another technology that has not been tested as a science experience on the population, which unfortunately has to use these things for work, and be essentially a guinea pig.
For the time being, I mean, we're hopeful that we'll have, you know, adequate voice dictation sometime soon, so that, you know, we're less constrained. But you know, mousing is going to be harder to get away from, I think.
Yeah, it's really hard, especially for graphic designers, architects, people like that. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about your observations about ergonomics and how you would see the future if it were better?
Well, it's hard to see how to get out of where we are now, because the ergonomic furniture industrial complex has really kind of frozen in place. You know, they've sold the idea of lumbar support, or they've sold the idea that people need to be supported while they're sitting. And it's sold a lot of chairs. And I know people in the chair design world who say, yeah, it's not so good, but we can't sell chairs unless they have lumbar support because we've taught people to expect that. So the idea that you could, you know, design a chair that was different and allowed people to support themselves with their internal ergonomics rather than, you know, leaning against a backrest and an armrest and a headrest and a footrest and a lumbar support to kind of like prop them up for, you know, 8 hours a day. It's hard to get away from that because it's become the norm. Um, I'm hopeful that, you know, like smoking, everybody smoked and that was normal. And then there was this like wake up call where everybody said, no, that's a terrible idea. And so we, as a culture, managed to put that, the whole business of smoking behind us when we recognized that it was a health hazard hiding in plain sight. Similarly, I think our current approach to ergonomic furniture is a catastrophe that we're going to have trouble getting away from. But once we wake up, to, you know, other possibilities, I think things could go a lot better. And really, we turned the corner on smoking in just a decade. So, you know, it's not impossible to change. It's not easy.
Thank you. It's an excellent note. I've been saying this myself for years. It's a good comparison between smoking and repetitive strain injury because they're cumulative traumas.
Right? They're cumulative traumas, and everybody has to type. So get over yourself. Well, couldn't we
Yeah,
type better or type less, or, you know,
let's
yeah.
rethink this. So I like this idea of waking up, and thank you for being part of our RSI Help YouTube wake up
Yeah.
call. We really love having you on and sharing your wisdom.
Happy to chat anytime.
Well, great. You'll come back then. We'll talk about something else totally fascinating.
Sure.
So thank everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks again.